You ever sign up for something thinking, yeah, this'll fix everything? That was me, standing outside the ranger station at Black Hollow, suitcase in one hand, coffee in the other, and not a single idea what the hell I just walked into. No cell service, no traffic, no sounds except the wind slicing through those towering pines like a warning. I thought it would be peaceful, quiet, simple. Turns out, simple doesn't exist out here. Not in Black Hollow. It took me 3 hours of driving on cracked asphalt and another 40 minutes down a dirt road that barely counted as drivable before I found the ranger station. A squat concrete thing, half swallowed by the forest, windows like dead eyes, and an antenna on top that looked like it hadn't been used since the Cold War. As I walked up, the door creaked open. Out stepped a man with a buzz cut and the kind of face that looked carved out of tree bark. His name tag read Marrow, all caps, no first name. "You Clark?" he asked. His voice was the sound gravel would make if it could talk. I nodded and stuck out my hand. He didn't shake it, just turned and walked back inside. "Come on, you're late." The station smelled like coffee and mildew. I dropped my bag by the desk. 3 more people were already there. One was a woman, short, pale, jet black hair tied in a severe knot. Kim. She looked at me like she was sizing up a dead thing. Next to her was Whitaker, an older guy with a deep tan and a stare that didn't blink. The 4th chair was empty. "Where's the other guy?" Marrow asked. Kim shrugged. "Still on shift." That's when I started to clue in. They weren't welcoming me. They were replacing someone. "We rotate shifts every 7 days, Marrow grunted, tossing me a battered radio. "You've got nights." "That's it?" I asked. "No training? Orientation?" Whitaker chuckled. It sounded like someone exhaling through a hole in their throat. "You'll figure it out," he said. "Just stay on the trails. Don't go past the red line. If you hear anything strange, call it in. Don't investigate." "Wait. Red line?" I pulled out my issued trail map. There was a red circle drawn in marker, but nothing on the terrain matched it. "You'll know it when you're there." No one elaborated. They just went back to their coffee like that was the end of the conversation. It wasn't even dark yet, and already I felt like a ghost had walked into someone else's grave. They sent me out just before sunset. The trail was narrow and overgrown. I carried a flashlight, a first aid kit, and a revolver they issued without asking if I'd ever shot a gun. The radio squawked once, then went dead. I assumed it was a bad signal. By the time night fell, I was 4 miles deep into the woods. There's something wrong with the dark out here. It isn't just the absence of light, it's heavy, like it's pressing down on your skin. The kind of dark that makes you hear things that aren't there, or worse, things that are. At 11:47 p.m., my radio crackled. "You hear it yet?" It was Kim's voice, distorted like it came from underwater. "Hear what?" I said, already regretting the question. Nothing but static. Then a whisper, so faint I almost missed it. "You." I turned in a full circle, flashlight beam bouncing across the trees. That's when I saw it. Something was crouched on the trail ahead of me. It was tall, too tall, gaunt, naked, but not in any way that suggested it had ever been human. Its limbs were just a little too long, its joints bent wrong. Its face was a smear, no mouth, no nose, just 2 glassy black eyes reflecting my light back at me. It didn't move. I blinked. It was gone. I nearly tripped over my own boots getting the hell out of there. Back at the station, I burst through the door like something was chasing me. The others barely looked up. "Saw something," I gasped, holding the radio like it could save me. Thing on the trail. Pale. Big. Staring at me. Marrow poured another cup of coffee. "First one's always a watcher," he said. "A what?" "They like new blood," Whitaker added. "Don't worry, they usually don't touch rookies." They laughed, not kindly, not even nervously, just tiredly, like they'd all had their turn. "Okay, hold on," I snapped. "What is going on out there? That wasn't a bear. That wasn't even a person." Kim stood. For the first time she looked me in the eyes. "You want to survive your shift?" she asked. "Then stop trying to name the things you see. Names give them attention. Attention gives them form." "You're all insane," I muttered. No one argued. Marrow handed me a key. "That's your cabin. Don't leave it after 2 a.m., ever, no matter what you hear." "Why?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Because the forest listens after 2, he said, and it doesn't like questions. I tried to sleep. The cabin was decent. Bare walls, cot, a heater that made more noise than warmth. I pushed a chair under the doorknob out of instinct. At exactly 2:11 a.m., I woke up. 3 knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. I held my breath. Open up, a voice said. My own voice. I didn't move. The doorknob twitched. The chair under it creaked. I sat there until dawn, hand wrapped around my pistol, breathing so shallow I nearly passed out. When I finally opened the door, there was nothing but a pile of pine needles, arranged in the shape of a hand. The next morning, I tried to tell myself I'd imagined it. The pale thing, the voice, the knocking, all of it. But then I found the pine needles still there, still in the shape of a hand, 5 fingers too long and wrong. I swept them away with the side of my boot, but I swear I heard them crunch like bone. I didn't mention it to the others, didn't have to, they already knew. The days were quiet. I walked the trails, logged broken fences, wrote down tracks, saw deer, saw wolves, saw something I couldn't identify leave 3-toed footprints that sank 2 inches into the earth like it weighed 1,000 pounds. No one commented when I brought it up at the station. Just coffee. Static on the radio. Kim drawing strange spirals in her notepad when she thought no one was looking. I kept noticing something else. Every map we had showed safe zones and boundary lines. But out there in the woods, there weren't any signs. No warnings, no paint. Just trees, moss, and fog. Endless. I asked Mara once, how do I know if I'm near the red line? He looked at me like I was asking how to tell if you were drowning. Your ears'll pop, he said. You'll feel sick, like a pressure in your blood. And if you look up, the trees'll look taller, thinner, and then it'll get quiet. That's it? I said, that's the warning? That is the warning. I didn't believe him. Until the 4th night. It started with a scream. Sharp, human, female. Somewhere east of Trail 9. I should have called it in. That's what the protocol says. I read the damn binder they gave me. But the scream, it sounded too real. I ran, headlamp bouncing, breath clouding the air, boots tearing up moss and twigs. Then it all stopped. No wind. No insects, just a dead silence that made my ears feel vacuumed. My stomach turned. I looked up. The trees above me weren't right, thin as spears, branches curled inward like they were reaching for each other. For me, I backed up slowly. Then I heard it again. Help, help me. Only it came from above. I aimed my light upward. At first I saw nothing, just gnarled limbs, black bark. Then I saw her. A woman, maybe early 20s, hanging by her ankles 10 feet up, tangled in branches but not caught, cradled, like the tree wanted her there. She wasn't moving, but her mouth was open. Help! I moved closer. That was my second mistake. The air grew colder the closer I got. Frost formed on the inside of my flashlight lens. I saw my breath coming faster and faster. It's okay, I called. I'll get you down. She turned her head toward me. I stopped cold. Her eyes were gone, hollow sockets. Lips stretched into a smile too wide for her face, and her voice kept playing, like a broken tape recorder skipping. Help, help me, help, help me. The words weren't coming from her throat. They were coming from inside the tree. The bark around her shifted, groaned. Cracked open like a jaw, I ran. I don't know how long I ran. Everything blurred. Branches whipped my face, roots caught my boots. My radio sputtered static but wouldn't connect. I was sure I was lost until, pop, my ears clicked. Then came the sounds, birdsong, wind, rustling leaves. I was out. Back in the normal forest, back on the right side of the red line. I found myself only a mile from the station. My knees gave out when I saw the lights from the antenna. Inside, I barely got the words out. There's a woman in the trees. I think she's dead. She was in them. In the tree. It was talking, mimicking her. No one laughed this time. Marrow stood, walked to the map, drew a red X in marker somewhere east of Trail 9. Another hangar, he said. Another. Wait, that's just normal to you? Kim finally looked up from her notepad. They leave them like warnings. We don't retrieve the bodies, not past the line. I was shaking. So what do? We just ignore it? Whitaker met my eyes for the first time that day. You made it back, kid, he said. That's all we do. That night, 2:11 a.m. came again. No knocking, This time something whispered under my floorboards. I didn't move, but I started to understand. Being a ranger at Black Hollow wasn't about protecting the park. It was about keeping it from getting out. I should have taken the first few days as a warning. The watcher. The woman in the tree. The thing knocking on my door like it wore my voice like a mask. I should have asked for a transfer, or quit, or just vanished into the night like whoever I replaced. But here's the thing about horror. Once it sets its hook, you stop thinking about escape. You start needing answers. Even if the answers rot you from the inside out. It had been 5 days since I saw her, that woman cocooned in the branches, smiling with no eyes, repeating, "Help me" on loop like a recording. They called her a hanger. Marrow hadn't gone back out there. No one had, just another red X on the map. That's when I realized something. They weren't watching the forest. They were avoiding it. And I wasn't. Not anymore. That night, I strapped on the headlamp, checked my revolver, and left the station at 11 sharp. Didn't tell anyone, didn't sign the logbook. I followed Trail 9 like before, but this time I brought a shovel. Because something out there was calling to me, and I wanted to see what was buried. It hit all at once. Pop. Ears equalized. Just like Marrow said. The insects vanished. The wind stopped. The light dimmed. Not like the sun had set, but like something had turned the color down. The forest past the red line wasn't dark. It was wrong. Like it had forgotten how to be a forest. I kept going, deeper than last time. The trees got thinner, taller. Their bark was black and oily like soot that bled. One of them had something nailed to it. I stepped closer. A piece of ranger uniform, faded, shredded, hung from a splintered jawbone. No skull, just the jaw. My stomach tightened, but I kept moving. I had to know. After another mile, I found it. A clearing I hadn't seen before. The trees opened up into a pit, about 20 feet wide, 10 feet deep. A near-perfect circle, carved out of the earth like something had scooped it up with a claw. Bones lined the edges. Not arranged, not buried, just placed. At the center, something was half buried in the dirt, metal and stone, covered in moss and runes. It looked like a lid, and it was humming. The moment I stepped near it, the forest whispered, not words. Not at first, just recognition. Like the trees were aware of me now. Like they'd been waiting. I dug. Hands blistered, heart pounding, breath fogging the cold, dead air. Every scrape of metal brought more of the thing into view. A disc of rusted iron, wrapped in vines that pulsed under my touch. The runes were old, deep, carved by hands that didn't belong to humans. When I cleared the center, I saw it. A hole the size of a fist, perfectly circular, like a key was missing. I touched it, and the forest screamed. It wasn't out loud. It was inside my skull, like static. Like a million teeth grinding behind my eyes. I staggered back, my vision blurred. I saw shapes in the trees, too many limbs, too many eyes, all watching. The earth trembled. Then the runes flared briefly and went dark again. I ran. I didn't stop until I hit the real forest again. Back to the world with sound and wind and animals. But something had followed me. I could feel it in my skin, in my teeth, like I'd breathed something in. I burst into the station just after 3 a.m. The others were waiting. Kim had her arms crossed. Whitaker looked like he was about to be sick. Marrow didn't even ask. He just said, "What did you dig up?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The look on his face said he already knew. Marrow lit a cigarette. First one I'd seen him smoke. "That lid's not just a seal. It's a mouth." "A mouth?" I asked. "We don't feed it. Not directly. We keep it asleep. That's the job." Then, what the hell are the watchers? What was the hangar? What about the people who go missing? I burst into the station just after 3 a.m. The others were waiting. Kim had her arms crossed. Whitaker looked like he was about to be sick. Marrow didn't even ask. He just said, "What did you dig up?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The look on his face said he already knew. Marrow lit a cigarette. First one I'd seen him smoke. "That lid's not just a seal. It's a mouth." "A mouth?" I asked. "We don't feed it. Not directly. We keep it asleep. That's the job." Then what the hell are the watchers? What was the hangar? What about the people who go missing? No one spoke. So I said it. "We're not rangers. We're jailers." Marrow exhaled smoke through his nose. "Now you're starting to get it." but they didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel what I felt when I touched it. That thing wasn't just sealed, it was aware. And now, it knows my name. The next morning, no one spoke to me. Kim didn't look up from her coffee. Whitaker stared at the wall like he'd seen something in it. Marrow handed me my radio without a word. They weren't mad at me. They were afraid. I'd crossed the line. I'd touched the seal. I had dirt under my fingernails that pulsed like it was still alive. I should have left. But I couldn't. Something in the pit, in that mouth, still buzzed inside my skull, like it had taken a taste and wanted more. At 1:39 a.m. I was wide awake in my cabin, radio off, flashlight dead. Something about the night felt wrong. The crickets had stopped again. But not from the red line. This was closer. I stepped outside, barefoot, heart hammering. That's when I saw the lantern. It moved between the trees near the Western Ridge Trail. Not swinging like someone was holding it normally. It floated, steady. I followed it. I moved through the trees, keeping my steps light, sticking to the shadows. Whoever was carrying that lantern didn't hear me. After 20 minutes, I reached a clearing I'd never seen on any map. There was a pit in the ground, deep, maybe 20 feet across, different from the one with the iron seal. This one was alive. It breathed, and kneeling around it were Kim, Whitaker, and Marrow, wearing bone necklaces, chanting in a language that hurt to hear. My stomach turned. Then I saw what was in the bucket. Raw meat, organs, something that looked like a tongue. Kim dumped it into the pit. The pit hissed, a sound like boiling flesh and thousands of insects crawling over each other. Something moved down there. I didn't see it. I only felt it, like teeth gnashing behind a curtain of dirt. The smell hit next, sweet rot, like syrup and corpses. I backed away too quickly, snapped a twig. The chanting stopped. 3 heads turned toward me, eyes shining in the dark. They didn't chase me, didn't even speak, just stared, lantern light flickering off bone necklaces, as I turned and ran like hell back through the trees. I locked myself in the cabin and sat in the shower with the water running cold for an hour, trying not to vomit. At dawn, Marrow was waiting outside my door. "You saw," he said. "What the hell was that?" He looked tired, sad even. "Containment protocol," he said. "It eats, we offer. It sleeps. That's the deal." "A deal with what?" He didn't answer, just handed me a roll of twine and a knife. "Next feeding's yours." I didn't sleep that day. Instead, I sat outside the station watching the trees. The forest was moving again, not in the wind, not naturally, breathing, pulsing like a sleeping heart. Later that night, Whitaker handed me a bucket. It was heavy, covered with a cloth. "Don't look inside if you want to keep your sanity," he said. I looked anyway. Inside were organs, not animal, too clean, too human. I snapped the lid shut and told myself it was just roadkill, a deer, maybe something cold. But deep down, I knew. We weren't feeding it animals, we were feeding it sacrifices. I carried that bucket through the forest like it was going to explode in my hands. When I reached the pit, it was already awake. The air above it shimmered and I swear the soil was twitching. I dumped the bucket. The meat vanished into the earth like water down a drain. Then came the sound. A low groan, almost a sigh. Contentment, hunger satisfied for now. I turned to leave, but something was waiting for me. A figure, just beyond the trees, tall, pale, eyeless, grinning, a watcher. It didn't move, just tilted its head and slowly raised its hand and waved, like it was welcoming me to the fold. The night after the feeding, I dreamed in black. Not darkness, black. A kind of living void like ink spilled in water. In the dream, I stood in the middle of the pit, the one we fed, but it was wider now, endless. And something was rising from it, a mouth. At least I think it was a mouth. It didn't have teeth, it had fingers, hundreds of them, writhing like worms, reaching for my face, my skin, my thoughts. I woke up choking. My sheets were soaked with sweat. My nails had dug blood into my palms, and for a second I couldn't remember my own name. Later that morning, I found Whitaker sitting outside the station, his face pale, eyes haunted. "You dream it yet?" he asked. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. "It starts slow," he said. "The dreams, then come the whispers, then the requests." "Requests?" He didn't respond, just stared at the tree line like something was about to step out of it. By nightfall, Whitaker was gone. He didn't show for patrol, didn't check in on the radio. His cabin was empty. Kim and Marrow didn't look surprised. It was his week, Marrow said, tightening the strap on his rifle. Week for what? Kim finally looked at me and spoke the words like a death sentence. He refused to feed it. We searched until 3 a.m., found his boot first, then his badge, then his jawbone, nailed to a tree just like the one I saw my first week here. That wasn't even the worst part. The jaw was still whispering, just faintly. Clark, Clark, come back, come back. It wasn't Whitaker's voice anymore. It was mine. Back at the station, I couldn't stop shaking. I locked myself in the cabin, turned on every light, radioed HQ for emergency evac. No answer, just a burst of static, then laughter. My laughter. Something in me broke that night, not like a bone, more like a door swinging open. At 2:11 a.m. sharp, the knocking returned. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't move. Darren, said a voice outside, low and patient. You don't have to run anymore, just open the door. I sat in the corner, gun shaking in my hand, aimed at the knob. We're proud of you, the voice said. You're part of us now. Then silence, not footsteps, not retreat, just quiet. And outside I heard the forest breathe. They came just after dusk, 3 of them, 2 guys, 1 girl, mid-20s, big grins, expensive gear, the kind of tourists that think rules are suggestions and danger is just misunderstood beauty. I watched them walk past the perimeter sign from the fire watch tower, headlamps flashing like lures on fishing hooks. They never even saw me. They were laughing. Laughing. Out here? It made my stomach twist. At 9:13 p.m. the radio crackled. Unregistered movement past Trail 2. Kim said. Her voice sounded flatter than usual. Tourists, I said. 3 of them. I saw them. They won't make it past the red line. I wasn't so sure. Part of me thought I should stop them, hike out, do the actual job I'd been hired for. But then I thought of Whitaker's jaw nailed to a tree, of the thing that whispered through the floorboards in my voice, of the pit. I stayed in the tower and watched. At 10:21 p.m., the forest began to shift. It starts with the fog, thick, unnatural, rolling in too fast, too quiet, like a blanket being pulled over a dying body. I saw the tourists' headlamps flicker, then blink out. Radio crackle. You seeing this? I asked. Yeah, Kim said. Don't interfere. What do you mean don't? They're not our problem. Not anymore. I climbed down from the tower anyway. Something in my gut told me if I didn't at least try, I wouldn't sleep again. Not that I'd really slept since my first Watcher sighting. I followed the trail to where I'd last seen them. The fog was thick enough to chew. My flashlight cut only a few feet ahead. Then I saw the girl. She was standing still, back to me, arms limp, head tilted too far to the left. I called out, Hey, you okay? She didn't move. I stepped closer. That's when she turned around, but not like a person. She twisted, torso rotating independently of her legs, bones cracking like dry branches. Her eyes were pure black, no sclera, no iris, just 2 full moons of nothing, and her mouth opened wider than it should have slowly. She didn't speak. She copied me. Hey, you okay? She said in my voice. Then she smiled. I ran. No shame in it, just instinct. My legs were smarter than my brain. I ran until I hit a clearing and nearly tripped over the 2 guys. They were sitting cross-legged facing each other. Eyes closed, skin pale. Between them was a mound of black moss that pulsed like a heart. As I watched, one of them started pulling teeth out of his own mouth. Calmly, quietly. The other one laughed, with my laugh. That's when I knew they weren't people anymore. Not really. I turned back, but the girl was behind me. She was still smiling, still mimicking. This time, she whispered, You're part of it now. I don't remember getting back to the station. I remember trees moving on their own. I remember a branch stroking my face like a lover's hand. But mostly I remember the sound of her voice copying mine, repeating, Darren Clark, Darren Clark, Darren Clark. The next morning I filed a report. I wrote, 3 trespassers entered Trail 2. No confirmed contact. Fog conditions prevented recovery. Area cleared. No sign of remains. It was a lie. I knew it. Kim knew it too. She read the log and said nothing. Just slid it into the cabinet with the others. There are dozens of them. Boulders marked with dates. People who walked into Black Hollow after dark. None of them made it out. Not really. and I finally understood the truth. The forest doesn't just need to be fed. It hunts on its own. That night, something stood outside my cabin again. Didn't knock, didn't whisper. It just waited, breathing. I noticed it first when the trees stopped bleeding sap. They bled something else. The color was wrong, brown-green, viscous like bile. It oozed from deep slashes in the trunks, as if the forest was cutting itself open. I radioed Marrow about it. "Yeah," he said flatly. "That's root rot." "A disease?" "Not quite." That was all he said. Later, Kim showed me the map again. Another red X, this one on Trail 7, an old logging road overgrown for years. She didn't look me in the eye. "If the rot's reaching there, we've got a week at most before it spreads to the waterline." "What happens if it does?" "Then we're all part of the forest." I hiked out to Trail 7 just before sunset. The moment I stepped onto it, I knew something was wrong. The trees shifted when I wasn't looking. I'd swear I saw one turn to face me. The bark was cracked open in places, pulsing like infected wounds. Roots had torn through the dirt, twisting around rocks, each of them veined, like arteries, like they were alive. And the smell, sweet like flowers left in a sealed casket. It stuck to my skin. At the old maintenance shed, I found the first corpse. Not human, not animal. It looked like a deer, but inside out. Bones on the outside, antlers curled inward, no eyes. Its mouth was open wide in a silent scream, and from its throat a sapling had grown. That was when I realized, the rot doesn't kill. It transforms. On the way back, I tripped on something hard buried beneath a clump of moss. I dug it out. A jawbone. Of course. But this one, it whispered. Not like Whitaker's did, not my name. This time it spoke in a child's voice. "It's hungry again. It needs roots, it needs blood. You're the next seed." I dropped it and ran. Didn't stop until the station was in sight, and even then, the voice stayed in my head like an infection. Marrow didn't question me when I stumbled back in, pale and shaking. Just pointed at the map. More X's, 4 of them, all closer to the main water supply. "It's going to breach," Kim said. Her voice was thin, and when it does, it won't matter what we feed it. It'll feed itself. I asked the only question that mattered. "What's in the soil?" No one answered, so I answered for them. "It's not just a creature." "No, it's something older." "Yes, it's growing. It's waking." That night I didn't sleep, because the roots had started to grow under my cabin. I heard them, scraping across the floorboards, and in my dream I opened my eyes and saw branches growing out of my mouth. It started with the floorboard in my cabin. It creaked differently than the others. A soft, hollow sound when I stepped on it, like it was covering a space that didn't belong. I pried it up with my knife. Underneath, a gap no bigger than a shoebox. Inside the gap, a canvas-wrapped bundle. And inside the bundle, a journal, old, water-warped. Pages stuck together in places. The first page was smeared with dried blood. At the top, written in thick black marker, "Ranger Michaels, do not read this if you want to sleep." I kept reading. Section 2. Warnings from the past. Michael's entries started normal. Trail patrols, injured fox, tourists caught off path. Then they changed. August 17 found Marrow and Whitaker digging at the North Grove. Asked what they were doing. They said soil testing, but I saw the bones. August 22nd, the pit hissed again. No one else heard it? Am I imagining it? September 3rd, Kim tried to warn me last night. Said the thing under the ground was older than names. She said if we stop feeding it, it won't die, it'll wake up. September 10, found altar, buried under the dead tree. Symbols match the seal on the pit. Something pulses when I touch it. I think it's a heart, a dead god's heart, still beating. The final page was mostly torn away, but the last full sentence hit like a gunshot. I buried the altar again. I couldn't destroy it. If you find this, don't dig it up. Don't listen to the dreams. That night, I dreamed of roots growing through my chest, and a voice whispering, "Dig me up." I found it. The dead tree Michaels mentioned. North Grove, just beyond a dry stream bed, completely leafless, even though the rest of the forest was green. Bark split wide like a wound. At its base, the earth was soft. I dug, and I found it. A stone altar no larger than a manhole cover wrapped in rotting roots. Symbols burned into it, the same as the ones on the pit's lid. They looked like crawling things, twisted limbs, hooks, mouths. When I touched it, my ears bled. And for 1 second, everything stopped. No wind, no birds, no breathing. The forest paused. Then something inside the altar moved. I didn't tell the others. Not yet, because the altar, it wasn't dead. It was another mouth, a second gate. The pit wasn't alone, it had a twin. And this one wasn't hungry, it was calling. Not just to me, to whatever was sealed beyond it. A deeper hunger, one we hadn't seen yet. I reburied it, fast. Then I walked back through the forest, feeling like I was being followed, but never turning around. Because I didn't need to. I knew what was behind me. The forest's original mouth, smiling. That night, I didn't go to the station. I sat in the dark in my cabin with the journal open and the revolver in my lap. There's something worse than the rot coming, and it has more than one way in. It happened during my shift. A tremor, deep and short, like thunder underground. At 1:17 a.m., the radio hissed to life. "Darren," Kim said, "you near Trail 12? I wasn't, but I was close. Something just collapsed out there," she continued. "Whitaker's on his way. Whitaker's dead." I didn't mean to say it aloud. It just came out. Silence on the line. Then, I don't know who just took a rifle and left the station. I ran, half because of the tremor, half because I needed to see what was down there. Trail 12 had always been abandoned. The terrain was unstable, prone to slides. But when I arrived, I realized it wasn't a slide this time. It was a breach. A sinkhole had opened, perfectly circular, 20 feet across, maybe twice that deep. The soil around it pulsed like bruised skin. Roots curled down the sides like veins. And inside, I saw steps. Not natural ones, carved stone steps, leading down. I hesitated, maybe for too long, but the smell hit me, sweet and foul, like sugar poured over rot. That smell was familiar now. It lived in my dreams. I took a step down, then another. The air shifted, colder, denser, like I'd passed through something, crossed a line that wasn't marked on any map. The walls were carved, not with tools but with teeth. Thousands of marks, circular and jagged, chewed into the stone. And deeper still, I began to hear breathing. Not mine, not human, heavy, slow, wet, like something dreaming, and slurping in its sleep. At the bottom of the pit, I found a chamber, and in the chamber, bones, human, animal, twisted into impossible shapes, spines that had too many vertebrae, skulls that were split open from the inside. At the center was a mound of black stone. It pulsed, alive. I stepped closer and my foot brushed something soft, a boot, still attached to a leg, Whitaker's. But it wasn't him anymore. It looked like him. Same height, same uniform, same gray hair. But his face was blank. Just smooth skin where the eyes and mouth should have been. His chest moved like he was breathing. But the sound came from the stone mound behind him. Whitaker turned toward me, and the skin over his face split open. Not blood. Moss. Thick, black, sentient moss poured out of him, crawling over his boots, reaching for me. I ran, didn't even look back, because that breathing had changed. It wasn't sleeping anymore. Back at the station, I slammed the radio button until Kim answered. "Seal's breached," I said. "There's something under the forest, beneath the pit, a whole chamber of it." Marrow took the radio. "You shouldn't have gone down there," he said. "There was someone, something, wearing Whitaker. The stone thing, it's waking up." He didn't argue, just said, "It always wakes when it smells fear." Then he powered down the radio. I couldn't sleep. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see darkness. I saw the mound, pulsing, grinning, waiting. And somewhere above it, on the forest floor, the trees began to bow, like they were praying to something rising beneath them. It was Marrow who told me someone was coming. "HQ's finally sending help," he said. I don't know why I laughed. Maybe because it was too late. Maybe because help felt like a joke out here. "Do they know what's happening?" I asked. He looked out the window. They never did. The new ranger showed up just after sunset. Jeep. Boots too clean. Pressed uniform. Name tag said Flores. His face was familiar. Too familiar. Something about his eyes. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected what you almost look like. He smiled too much. Didn't blink. And when I shook his hand, his skin was cold. The others didn't question him. Kim shook his hand. Marrow gave him the standard issue gear. Neither looked him in the face. I did. And I noticed things. Small things. His boots never got dirty. He never ate, never drank. His radio never turned on, but he still responded. And on the second night, I heard him in the woods, speaking a language no one should speak. I followed him, down to the feeding pit. He stood there, arms wide, head tilted back, like he was listening to something below. Then he said, "The door is open, the seed is chosen," and the earth groaned back. I stepped on a branch. He turned to face me, still smiling. "You don't have to be afraid, Darren," he said. "It's you. It's always been you." I ran. I confronted Marrow. "Flores isn't real." He didn't argue, just rubbed his eyes like he was too tired to care. "Does it matter anymore?" he asked. "What is he?" Kim answered for him. "Something the forest made to wear a man's shape." Why? Because it needs a guide. It needs someone to speak for it. Someone to open the rest of the seals. And then she looked at me. It was supposed to be him. That night I caught Flores carving into the cabin walls. The symbols matched the altar. They bled. He was humming, a lullaby I used to hear from my mother. One I hadn't remembered in years, but he sang it in her voice. When I stepped into the doorway, he stopped. Smiled. "We used to walk this forest together, remember?" he asked. I raised my pistol. "You're not Flores. I'm not anyone. I'm what's left over." Then he stepped back into the dark, melted into it. Like he'd never been solid at all. The next day, the Firewatch tower was scorched black. Inside, a second radio, and on the frequency, my voice, calling for help, over and over and over. But I never said those words, and that wasn't my message. We left just after dawn, before the sun could rise high enough to shine over the trees. Kim said it was safer that way. Less light, less attention. Less chance the forest would notice us coming. She didn't speak as we hiked, and I didn't ask questions. I'd seen enough to know that the answers never made things better. She carried a canvas bag in both arms, clutching it like something sacred. I saw blood seeping through the bottom. I didn't ask. By midday, we reached the clearing. I'd seen parts of the forest that made me question reality. Places where trees whispered in voices I recognized. Ravines where the wind moved against gravity. Even the sky sometimes looked too close, like I could touch the clouds with my bare hands. But nothing prepared me for the feeding tree. It towered at the center of the clearing like a god no one prayed to anymore. 50 feet tall, trunk wide as a cabin, wrapped in rusted black chains that groaned when the wind moved through them. Bark like flesh, slick, dark, veined, and the sound it made, a low, wet pulse like a heartbeat underwater. My own chest synced with it involuntarily. "Don't speak," Kim said. Her voice was low, hollow. "Not until it accepts the offering." She stepped forward and knelt. I stayed back, one hand resting on the grip of my flashlight. Not that light had helped lately. Kim opened the canvas bag. The smell hit me first. Rotten meat, but worse. Copper and bile and something that made my stomach clench like a fist. She pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle and unrolled it gently at the base of the tree. It wasn't a cut of beef. It was a child's arm. Small, pale, fingers curled slightly, bruised at the wrist. "What the fuck, Kim?" I stepped forward instinctively, bile rising in my throat. She didn't even look at me. "You can't speak right now," she hissed. "Do you want it to notice you before we're ready?" I backed off, breathing hard. The watchers were already arriving. They emerged one by one from the tree line. Those tall, crooked silhouettes with no faces, just empty eyes and slack mouths. They never made noise. They didn't need to. Just looking at them was enough to feel your sanity start to fray at the edges. Kim took out a small carved totem. Bone, stained black with what I assumed was blood. She placed it beside the offering and pulled an iron key from her jacket, pressing it to her forehead as she began to chant. I couldn't make out the words. They weren't meant for me. The tree responded, slowly, deeply. It moaned. A thick, drowning groan that made the soil tremble beneath our boots. The chains clanked softly. A shiver ran through the branches above, like the whole canopy had taken a breath. Then the spores came. Fine, silvery particles drifted from the roots, rising instead of falling. They sparkled like ash. They floated toward me, and I tried to wave them off, but the moment I inhaled even a little, I was somewhere else. I was back in the ranger station, but it was wrong. Everything covered in rotten moss, the walls breathing. Whitaker stood at the window, skin peeled off like a glove, smiling at me. "It's hungry," he whispered. "Always hungry." Then I blinked, and I was underground, bones piled up in the dark. Roots wrapped around my legs, pulling me deeper. A vast eye opened in the earth below me. It blinked. My lungs filled with dirt. "Feed." I screamed and flailed, and just like that, I was back. Face down in the clearing, spores swirling, my hands shaking. Kim was still chanting. She looked wrong. Her eyes rolled back, mouth open wide, a deep rasping voice coming from her that couldn't possibly be hers. And the tree, God help me, it was responding. The bark split open along the trunk with a sickening crack, revealing something inside. A pulsing membrane. A mouth. Fleshy folds peeled back, glistening wet, lined with ridges that twitched. The chains rattled again, and one of them snapped. It didn't fall. It slithered, disappearing into the undergrowth like it was alive. The watchers stepped closer, still silent. The tree groaned again, and this time I swear it said my name. "Darren." I grabbed Kim by the shoulders. "Snap out of it," I shouted. "It's feeding. Now! You have to stop!" But she didn't hear me. Or maybe she wasn't her anymore. She reached into the bag and pulled out something still moving. A small animal, rabbit maybe, or a fox. It twitched in her arms as she held it up toward the tree's mouth. "No," I breathed. I knocked the thing out of her hands. She screamed, loud and ragged, like I'd stabbed her. The watchers flinched. One of them stepped forward, reaching toward me with fingers that bent the wrong way. Roots erupted from the soil, lashing toward us. I barely managed to tackle Kim to the side as one of the tendrils slammed into the ground where we stood. The totem she'd placed cracked against a rock and shattered. Everything changed. The watchers screamed. Not a sound from mouths, but a noise from inside my skull, sharp and cold and endless. The tree recoiled. Its open mouth gushed black sap like blood. Kim writhed in my arms, her nose bleeding, eyes wide and terrified. "I was wrong," she sobbed. "It's not asleep, it's starving." Another root whipped toward us. I slashed it with my pocket knife, and it hissed, retreating. My mind scrambled for anything useful. Anything I'd read in that journal beneath my cabin floor. The carvings, the glyphs. The tree wasn't just being fed, it was being bound. If I could finish the pattern, I charged the trunk. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was instinct, maybe something worse, but I started carving into the bark with my knife. The symbols came to me not in thought, but muscle memory. Circles, crosses, loops with thorns. I didn't know their meaning, but my hand did. The bark bled where I cut it. Roots flailed wildly around me. I was slashed across the back, torn through my coat, but I didn't stop. Kim screamed behind me, and the watchers began chanting again. "Feed, feed, feed." I carved one final glyph above the tree's mouth, and then stabbed the knife into the wood as deep as I could. The world broke. Light shot from the tree like a flare, sickly green and blinding. The watchers shrieked and stumbled back, some collapsing, others melting into the soil. The chains snapped one by one, slithering into the woods like worms fleeing a flame. The mouth collapsed in on itself. Roots pulled back. The moaning stopped. The forest held its breath. Then the tree gave one final shudder and fell silent. I stood there panting, hands covered in blood and sap. Kim crawled to my side, her face pale as death. She touched the carvings with trembling fingers. "You bound it again," she whispered. "You didn't kill it, just silenced it." "Can it come back?" She nodded. "It always comes back." We sat together in the dirt while the watchers fled, their pale forms vanishing into the trees. And the worst part? The forest smiled. I could feel it. Even in defeat, it was grinning. I knew we didn't win. Even after the watchers scattered, even after the feeding tree went still, I knew. The forest was just quiet. Not dead. Just waiting. Kim leaned against me, her breath ragged. She was cold, shaking. Her eyes kept flicking toward the tree like it might move again. "We should go," I said, "before it changes its mind." She didn't respond. Blood trickled from her ear. Her voice had been used too much by something else. Now she barely had her own. I helped her stand and we walked out of that clearing, me half expecting the tree to grab us one last time. It didn't. It let us leave. And that was worse. By the time we reached the ranger station, the sun had started to rise. Or something like the sun. The sky was off, too yellow like infected skin. The trees cast shadows that didn't match their shapes. My stomach twisted as I looked at them. Some bent toward us. Others pulsed like they were breathing. I opened the front door to the station and froze. It was empty. Stripped, all the weapons were gone. The radio was a mess of wires and static. The walls were clawed up, and the map on the wall had been torn down and replaced with a single phrase scrawled in soot, "You can't leave." And next to it, "Welcome to the final watch." Kim sat on the floor, her back against the wall, arms folded around herself like she was trying to hold something inside. "I think it wants us to choose," she whispered, "feed it or become it." I moved to the radio, tried to patch together a signal. The air buzzed with static. Then, "Darren, you're late for your shift," Whitaker's voice, or something using it. I dropped the mic. The signal hissed again, and now it was Marrow's voice. "They're already here." The lights flickered. There was a knock at the front door. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. I didn't move, neither did Kim. The knock came again, harder this time. Then came the voice. My voice. "Darren, let me in. I'm you." I picked up the shotgun from the closet, the last one we had. It was half loaded and cracked at the stock, but it would fire. I aimed it at the door and whispered, "Try me." Nothing. The knocking stopped. But outside I heard them, hundreds of feet moving in the trees, branches breaking, wet, hungry breathing. The forest was alive, and now it had no leash. The red line was gone. The feeding tree was quiet, but the forest wasn't. We didn't bind it. We just woke it up. I stood in the center of the station, breathing shallow, watching shadows slide under the cracks in the windows. "Kim," I said, "we're not going to make it through the night." She didn't answer. She was staring at her own hands, watching them twitch like she didn't recognize them anymore. "It's already inside us," she whispered. "We breathed it in, the spores. It's choosing." Choosing what? Who's next? Outside, the wind picked up, but it wasn't wind. It was breathing. The forest breathing. Then came the sound I hadn't heard in days, screaming, human, close. I ran out the front door, shotgun raised. A figure staggered down the trail toward us, covered in blood, clothes shredded. One of the missing hikers? No, it was the hiker. The one Kim fed to the tree. I'd seen the arm, but he was walking, his face twisted in pain, in hunger. His mouth opened and 3 voices poured out at once. "Let us feed. Let us feed. Let us feed." I pulled the trigger. His chest exploded, but he didn't fall. He kept walking, gurgling, grinning. Kim appeared beside me, a flare in hand. "Run!" We fell back to the station as the woods opened up. They came pouring through the trees, watchers, twisted forms of tourists, former rangers with skin like bark, mouths sewn shut, dragging chains behind them, and then something else. It crawled up from the trail like it had been waiting. Tall, thin, dressed in my uniform, badge crooked, face exactly like mine, only wrong, eyes too wide, smile too sharp. He waved. "Last shift," he said in my voice. "Time to clock in." I raised the gun. He didn't even flinch. "Why fight it?" he asked. "You already belong here." Behind him the forest churned. The trees pulled themselves up by their roots and began moving. A tower of rotten bark slithered in the distance. I realized the feeding tree wasn't one tree, it was every tree. It was the forest, and it was awake. I turned to Kim. "What happens if we burn it all?" She blinked slowly. "Nothing burns in Black Hollow." "Then we do it anyway." I kicked open the back door of the station and yanked the emergency fuel from the shed, 2 jugs of kerosene and an ignition flare. They'd used it once before. In the journal. The ranger who wrote it had tried, but he hadn't gone far enough. I would. We doused the cabin, the trees, the trail. We poured fuel into the root hollows, the carved stones, the broken altar we'd unearthed. Then we stood in the center of it all. The watchers surrounded us. My doppelganger tilted his head, smiling wider. "You'll just become part of it," he said. "The fire won't save you." I struck the flare, held it up. "Maybe, but I won't feed it." And I dropped it. The flames roared. The watchers screamed, not aloud but in me. My skull filled with 1,000 howling voices. The trees writhed, branches clawing at the sky. The sky itself shivered. Kim screamed beside me, and for a second I thought she was burning, But no, she was changing. Her eyes glowed, her skin pulsed with light like sap under her veins. "Don't stop," she screamed. "Keep it going." The forest tried to snuff the fire. The rain started, sudden and cold. But the fire didn't die. It spread. The trees split open. Light poured out of them. And something inside screamed. The earth cracked. The watchers fell one by one. The forest turned on itself, devouring the chains, the roots, the runes, erasing everything. I watched it die. I watched it live. I watched it become something else. And then it was over. I woke up alone, lying in black ash. The station was gone. The trees were hollowed out, still smoking. Kim was gone. So was the thing that wore my face. But the forest, still there. Quieter now. Almost peaceful. And in the distance, deep beneath the roots, I swear I heard something whisper, "Next time." I don't know if I burned it out or became part of it. All I know is, I'm still here. Still in uniform, still on patrol. The forest doesn't need a feeding tree anymore. It has me. Final log entry, Ranger Darren Clark, Black Hollow Watchtower, last shift,